May 28, 1940. Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring placed the intelligence report on the table with open contempt. The document described President Roosevelt's request to Congress for an unprecedented expansion of American aircraft production, the ability to manufacture 50,000 planes each year. The Americans must be desperate if they think such propaganda will frighten us, Göring told his staff. They understand nothing about war production. Let them attempt to convert their automobile factories. They will soon discover that building warplanes requires more than simple assembly lines. What Göring failed to understand was that in Detroit, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. The former president of General Motors, now serving for just $1 a year as Roosevelt's production chief, was organizing the most ambitious industrial transformation the world had ever seen. Within 4 years, American factories would produce not the impossible 50,000 aircraft that had been mocked in Berlin, but nearly 100,000 planes every year, while at the same time supplying 2 distant theaters of war across opposite oceans. The announcement that provoked German contempt came on May 16, 1940, as German panzers raced across France. Standing before Congress, Franklin Roosevelt declared, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." Even allies reacted with skepticism. In 1939, the United States had produced only 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps possessed just 1,700 combat planes, many already obsolete. Yet Roosevelt demanded a 14-fold increase in production. William Knudsen became the architect of this miracle. When asked who could possibly achieve such impossible production goals, presidential advisor Bernard Baruch replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." Knudsen had abandoned his $300,000 salary to serve his adopted nation, bringing the principles of automotive mass production into aircraft manufacturing. The transformation began immediately. By December 1941, American factories were producing 2,000 military aircraft every month, a 20-fold increase compared with 2 years earlier. The Ford Motor Company announced plans for a massive bomber factory at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded its facilities in Seattle. Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of new workers. The arsenal of democracy was awakening. The Nazi leadership's dismissal of American capabilities came from both racial prejudice and deliberate blindness. General Friedrich von Berthica, the German military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, sent accurate reports describing the growing American industrial mobilization. His December 1940 cable warned, "American war production will reach unimaginable heights." Berlin dismissed these warnings as defeatist exaggeration. When Berthica met Hitler in February 1939 to discuss American potential, the Führer launched into a rant about American racial degeneracy instead of listening to intelligence assessments. Hitler declared that Americans were half Judaized, half negrified, and incapable of sustaining a real war effort. This ideological blindness would prove fatal. The prejudice spread through every level of the Nazi system. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports that women were entering aircraft factories, interpreting it as a sign of American desperation. They simply could not imagine that democratic mobilization might surpass totalitarian command. When reports arrived describing factories operating 3 shifts a day, German analysts assumed the claims were exaggerated. The Nazi worldview simply could not comprehend American reality. Ford's Willow Run plant became the ultimate symbol of that American ambition, a massive industrial complex built on farmland. Beginning April 18, 1941, it became the largest factory in the world under a single roof, 3.5 million square feet with an assembly line stretching nearly 1 mile. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, boldly promised to build 1 B-24 Liberator bomber every hour, while most aircraft factories were still producing only 1 per day. The early results were disastrous. The first bomber, finished in September 1942, had to be completely rebuilt. Quality control failures reached nearly 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run was producing only 56 bombers per month, far below the promised hundreds. Critics mocked the project, calling it Will it run? But Ford engineers refused to give up. They broke the B-24's 488,193 parts into manageable subassemblies. They created hydraulic riveting tools, prefabricated wiring harnesses, and introduced moving aircraft assembly lines. In 1943 alone, engineers managed 578 design changes while keeping production moving. By September 1943, monthly production had climbed to 148 bombers. By December, it reached 365. The real breakthrough came in April 1944, when Willow Run produced 428 B-24 bombers, one aircraft every 63 minutes, operating 24 hours a day. This single factory was now outproducing the entire German aviation industry. German pilots first began noticing American industrial superiority during the Tunisia campaign. Major Johannes Steinhoff, commander of JG-77, wrote in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing of all, there seemed to be more of them every day." The realization accelerated through 1943. On January 27, American bombers carried out their first raid on Germany itself, when 64 bombers attacked Wilhelmshaven. By October, during the infamous Black Thursday raid on Schweinfurt, the Americans could lose 60 B-17s and replace them within 2 weeks. The mathematics of industrial war had become unavoidable. During Big Week, from February 20th to 25th, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces launched 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft factories. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, but more importantly nearly 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland reported to Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters every month while producing only 1,000. Meanwhile, the United States was producing 2,500 fighters monthly while losing only 400. Major Heinz Bahr, one of Germany's leading aces with 220 victories, described a January 1944 mission over Brunswick. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was hopeless. By 1944, American aircraft production had reached astonishing levels. That year alone, U.S. factories produced 96,270 aircraft, including 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. This single year of American production exceeded Germany's entire wartime aircraft output, estimated at about 94,677 planes. The difference was not only in numbers. Each American bomber carried 13.50 caliber machine guns with thousands of rounds of ammunition. German fighters increasingly flew missions with reduced ammunition loads. American bombers featured powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation equipment. Many German fighters often flew without fully functioning radios. By May 1944, Boeing's Seattle Plant No. 2 was producing 16 B-17 bombers per day. Douglas Aircraft, which employed only 68 workers in 1936, had grown to 167,000 employees across 9 factories. North American Aviation was producing 500 P-51 Mustangs every month. Lockheed reached production of 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, while implementing 2,127 combat-driven improvements. The supporting industries matched this incredible pace. General Motors built 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Built 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Alcoa's aluminum output increased by 600%. Dow Chemical's magnesium production rose from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million. The transformation of America's workforce shattered Nazi assumptions. Women who represented less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941 made up 65% by 1943, more than 310,000 women in the aircraft industry. At Douglas Long Beach, 22,380 of the 41,620 employees were women. Rose Will Monroe, the original Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. Women inspectors at Douglas reduced defect rates from 3.2% to 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools for smaller hands, which unexpectedly improved efficiency. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced fatigue, and better positioned workstations lowered injuries. German intelligence interpreted female employment as a sign of desperation. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed these workers as temporary and predicted that quality would collapse. Instead, precision improved. Women proved exceptionally skilled at detailed tasks, wiring, instruments, and inspection. Their integration became a symbol of democratic strength rather than weakness. While American production soared, Germany retreated deeper into fantasy. Göring authorized the Jaeger program in February 1944, dispersing aircraft production into 729 underground factories using slave labor. The Mittelwerk complex alone employed 60,000 prisoners under horrific conditions, with 20,000 dying. These underground factories produced more defects than aircraft. Slave laborers sabotaged components. Transporting parts between scattered facilities caused constant delays. Quality control collapsed. The entire Mittelwerk complex produced fewer engines each month than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation accelerated. Boeing developed modular construction for the B-29, spreading production across 4 factories with completely interchangeable parts. The pressurized B-29, costing $650,000 each, contained technology Germany could not match even in experimental prototypes. By early 1945, America was producing 100 B-29 bombers every month. June 6, 1944, demonstrated the full power of American industry. The D-Day invasion deployed 11,590 Allied aircraft against only 319 German sorties, a 36-to-1 superiority. This was not simply tactical advantage. It was industrial annihilation. Between January and May 1944, preparatory bombing dropped 145,000 tons of bombs on German targets, more than all German bombing of Britain during the entire war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in a single day, using more planes than Germany's entire transport fleet had ever possessed. By December 1944, single bombing raids included 1,200 bombers escorted by 900 fighters. P-51 Mustangs had the range to reach Poland, the performance to challenge any enemy aircraft, and existed in such vast numbers that losses became almost irrelevant. German pilots called them Indians, because they seemed to appear everywhere at once. As defeat approached, even the Nazi leadership admitted the scale of the production disaster. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now appear to be criminal delusions. We are fighting the greatest industrial power in the world with nothing but rhetoric." Rommel told his staff shortly before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for everyone we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will arrive with such overwhelming material superiority that no position will hold." Even Hitler, speaking to Speer in January 1945, admitted, "We should have listened to Bertika's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." Albert Speer later testified that American bombing reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated clearly, the American attacks, which followed a definite system of assault on industrial targets, caused the breakdown of German armaments. Germany's Me-262 jet fighter, which became operational in mid-1944, represented genuine innovation, nearly 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring believed this wonder weapon could restore German air superiority despite overwhelming numerical inferiority. But Germany produced only 1,430 Me-262s in total, with never more than 200 operational at the same time. The engines required major overhaul after just 10 hours of operation. Critical materials were unavailable, forcing engineers to substitute inferior components. Meanwhile, the United States had begun jet development in 1942. Although the Bell P-59 proved inferior to German jets, Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, superior to any German jet design, entered production before the war ended. America's enormous industrial capacity allowed the simultaneous development of multiple advanced technologies, a luxury Germany simply could not afford. The contrast perfectly illustrated the outcome of the production war. Germany's technological advantage in jets meant little against America's ability to produce thousands of conventional fighters, while still developing the next generation of aircraft. In total war, quality without quantity proved meaningless. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by units of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division, marked the beginning of his confrontation with reality. At first, during interrogation in Augsburg, he remained defiant, insisting that German technology had been superior and that defeat resulted only from overwhelming Allied numbers. His later transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, a special facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, brought far more intensive questioning. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted long interviews that documented Göring's gradual recognition of American industrial superiority. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring admitted. "But the execution exceeded my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at its peak. It was incomprehensible." He expressed particular astonishment at American logistics. "Your ability to supply forces across two oceans while maintaining domestic production, this was beyond our imagination. We could not adequately supply forces even 500 miles from Germany, yet you supplied armies 5,000 miles from America." During the Nuremberg trials, prosecutors confronted Göring with overwhelming evidence of American production superiority. Charts showed that by 1944, the United States was producing more aircraft every month than Germany produced in an entire year. Film footage of Willow Run's assembly lines was shown while prosecutors listed the German cities destroyed by bombers produced at that single factory. Göring's testimony on March 14, 1946, revealed his struggle to comprehend the scale of American production. "I believed the economic and technical potential of the United States to be unusually great, particularly in the Air Force," he said. "But I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert recorded Göring's growing obsession with production statistics. He repeatedly calculated ratios, comparing single American factories to entire German industries. He seemed especially fixated on Willow Run, referring to it again and again as "that damned factory that broke our backs." When shown that America had produced 812,615 aircraft engines, compared to Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the numbers in silence. The mathematical reality of defeat was impossible to deny. The scale of the transformation remains astonishing even today. From producing just 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, the United States built 295,959 aircraft by the end of the war, including 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other aircraft. This represented not only quantity, but systemic superiority across every aspect of production. At its peak, 2 million Americans worked in aircraft manufacturing, representing an unprecedented diversity of workers: women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens. This democratic mobilization achieved something totalitarian systems never could: voluntary cooperation that exceeded the productivity of forced labor in every measurable way. The workforce that entered aircraft factories in 1941, often knowing nothing about aviation, emerged by 1945 as the most skilled aviation workforce in the world. They did not simply build airplanes, they revolutionized manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control methods developed for bomber production became standard industrial practices worldwide. Automation principles pioneered at Willow Run transformed global manufacturing. The engineers who designed bomber assembly lines would later design the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24 bombers would raise children who eventually walked on the moon. The production miracle did not end with victory. It launched the American century. The financial scale of this effort defied traditional economic assumptions. Aircraft production consumed $45 billion in 1940s currency, equivalent to roughly $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet instead of bankrupting the United States, wartime production created unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment, which had plagued America throughout the Great Depression, disappeared completely. Personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. Workers themselves helped finance the war effort through war bonds. Employees at Willow Run alone purchased $45 million in bonds, effectively helping fund the operations of the very factory where they worked. Germany, by contrast, devoted 40% of its total industrial capacity to aircraft production by 1944, yet still produced less than half of America's output. Slave labor, increasingly used by the German war economy, proved catastrophically inefficient. Sabotage became widespread. Quality collapsed. Productivity per German worker actually declined after 1943, while American productivity increased by 300%. The vast industrial infrastructure built for war became the foundation for post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters constructed to build bombers later produced materials for suburban housing. Chemical plants that manufactured aviation fuel later created plastics for consumer goods. Machine tool factories that equipped aircraft plants later supplied equipment that powered American industrial dominance. Beyond raw production numbers lay extraordinary organizational efficiency. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies across the country. IBM punch card machines tracked millions of components moving between thousands of suppliers. The MIT Radiation Laboratory, employing 4,000 scientists, developed radar and navigation systems that allowed American bombers to operate in all weather conditions. When combat revealed that B-17 bombers were vulnerable to frontal attacks, Boeing added chin turrets within just 60 days. When Pacific operations demanded longer range, Consolidated modified B-24 bombers without delay. Without stopping production. German modifications often required months or even years. American improvements took weeks. This adaptability proved just as decisive as total production volume. American aircraft evolved continuously based on global combat experience. Information traveled from Pacific battlefields to Atlantic production lines within days. German aircraft, built in isolated underground factories by slave labor, remained largely unchanged while American designs improved constantly. The feedback loop between combat and production reached unprecedented efficiency. Pilots' observations reached engineers almost immediately. Engineers' solutions reached assembly lines within days. Suggestions from assembly line workers moved directly to aircraft designers. This democratic flow of information proved superior to Germany's rigid hierarchical command structure. On October 15, 1946, only hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he made his most complete admission about the importance of the production war. The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess. We were not defeated by better soldiers but by better factories. The nation we dismissed as capable only of building consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel. His final recorded statement to G.M. Gilbert was equally revealing. We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed. They did not simply outproduce us. They revolutionized production itself. Every aspect of their system proved superior to ours. Göring committed suicide that same night, but his final testimony stands as history's verdict on the production war. The Reichsmarshal who had mocked American capabilities died knowing that a single American factory produced more aircraft than his entire Air Force had ever built. Military historians widely consider the American production achievement the decisive factor in the Allied victory. Without that overwhelming material superiority, D-Day would have been impossible, the strategic bombing campaign unsustainable, and the Pacific War unwinnable. Historian Richard Overy, one of the leading scholars of the Air War, summarized the reality clearly. The outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. The Allies won because they buried their enemies beneath an avalanche of production. The numbers confirmed this beyond doubt. By 1944, the United States alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, both Axis and Allied. This was not a small advantage. It was overwhelming industrial dominance. Germany was facing not merely defeat, but inevitable destruction. Yet the significance of the production miracle went far beyond military victory. It demonstrated the superiority of democracy over dictatorship, freedom over tyranny, and voluntary cooperation over forced obedience. The workers who made this transformation possible were not slaves or conscripts. They were free citizens united by a common purpose. Hermann Göring's dismissal of American production capacity stands today as one of history's most catastrophic miscalculations. His contempt for democratic industrial potential helped cost Germany the war and millions of lives. His failure to recognize American capabilities effectively sealed the Third Reich's fate before the first bomber ever reached German skies. The transformation from 3,000 aircraft per year to nearly 100,000 annually proved that free societies, when confronted with existential threats, could achieve what once seemed impossible. American workers did not simply meet Roosevelt's ambitious goal, they doubled it. They did not merely match German production. They exceeded it fivefold, while simultaneously fighting a massive war across the Pacific Ocean. Leaders today would do well to remember Göring's mistake. Dismissing democratic nations as weak because they prefer peace, or underestimating the productive power of free societies simply because they prioritize prosperity over conquest, can lead to catastrophic miscalculation. In 1940, the United States appeared unprepared for war. By 1944, it had become an unstoppable industrial colossus. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines could be just as decisive as battle lines, that factory workers could be as important as soldiers, and that industrial mobilization could determine victory just as surely as military strategy. Göring learned this lesson too late, at the cost of his nation's destruction. From his dismissive reaction to Roosevelt's announcement in May 1940 to his execution at Nuremberg in October 1946, Hermann Göring's story mirrored the rise and fall of Nazi Germany. His contempt for American production became the epitaph of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with capability, mistook tyranny for strength, and believed racial mythology could overcome the mathematics of industry. The Reichsmarshal who mocked American aircraft production died knowing that American factories built more planes in 1944 alone than Germany produced during the entire war. His mockery of democratic industry became history's most expensive joke, paid for in the currency of total defeat. America produced 295,959 military aircraft. Germany produced 94,677. But the true victory lay not only in numbers, it lay in method. It proved that free workers could outproduce slaves, that democratic cooperation could surpass totalitarian command, and that a nation of immigrants and diverse citizens could unite to accomplish the impossible. The B-24 bombers rolling off Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes were not just aircraft. They were democracy's answer to tyranny. Each rivet driven by a woman who had been a housewife only months earlier. Each engine assembled by a teenager who had left school to serve. Each wing built by workers who had once fled poverty and discrimination. Together they proved that free people, united by a just cause, could bury tyranny beneath an avalanche of production. Hermann Göring laughed at the idea of America producing 50,000 aircraft per year. America answered by producing twice that number, reshaping the course of world history. His laughter echoes through history as the sound of catastrophic miscalculation, the fatal dismissal of democracy's industrial power by a man who understood neither democracy nor production. In the end, both buried him, and everything he represented, beneath 300,000 aircraft that transformed his contempt into one of history's most complete